Good morning. This is Faith in Our Hometown, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin. And now, here is your host, Father Jay Friedel.
Good morning. I'm Aaron Brown, sitting in for Father Jay, and it's good to be with you on this Sunday morning. And I'm here today with Matt Porte, who is a social worker, actually a counselor, and he is at Renewed Mental Health. And we're going to be talking about one of the most important things I think that human beings need to cultivate within them, and that is compassion. How do we develop it? What happens when compassion breaks down? And so I'm really excited about hearing from him on this fine Sunday morning. So make sure you go get yourself a cup of coffee and get a comfy chair and be ready for some exciting and interesting stuff happening here on Faith in Our Hometown on this fine Sunday. So we'll be right back after this brief Mercy Minute.
I have arthritis in my knees, and it was just excruciating. I wish I would have done something sooner. I found myself not able to go up and down stairs, which is bad because we realized we were going to have to sell our house. We decided just to take the worst one first, and we did. I was back to work in 6 weeks. 6 months later, I had surgery on the second one, and I'm back to work in 5 weeks. And I was a little scared, a little apprehensive, even though I knew everything that was going to happen. But I was just impressed. Life is short, and I waited. I think I waited too long.
So welcome back, and I'm excited to be here talking to Matt Porte, who is a counselor at Renewed Mental Health, and we are going to be talking about compassion today. But before we talk about compassion, Matt, I want to know a little bit about you.
Sure.
This is our first time to meet, and so tell us and tell our viewers, who are you?
Yeah.
What's going on in your heart and mind?
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so kindly.
Pleasure to have you.
I grew up here in Joplin, actually, and graduated here. And then I went to MSSU and studied in their psychology program. Okay. Beautiful program, beautiful professors, couldn't have asked for better. And then I knew, going a little bit back, at the age of 16 that I wanted to be a counselor. I knew that. Yeah.
What happened at age 16?
Call it a spiritual awakening.
Yeah.
You know, I had this recognition of, hey, life isn't necessarily meant to be all depressing and dark, and I'd like to get more out of my life. I'd like to give others the chance to get more of their lives, to have a life of happiness and meaning.
Yeah. Well, did you feel like you were coming out of a time of darkness?
I did, absolutely, very much. It was pretty tumultuous for most of my life, for various reasons, health reasons and the like. Yeah. But then after college, I decided I wanted to go into social work because it was the perfect blend of everything I was looking for. Mm-hmm. And I actually applied to the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and I went there, and I lived in Milwaukee for about 5 years. And then after having gotten married up there, my wife and I and the kids decided to move back down here. And it was probably the best decision we could have made, as Joplin is my hometown.
Center of the universe.
Right? Yeah. Yes, that's exactly it. And so I ended up getting a job with Renewed Mental Health a little bit later. Excuse me. And got to live my passion of being a counselor. Now, I'll go back to grad school a moment. In my Trauma 2 class, we were learning about shame. Shame is a fundamental human emotion that's incredibly uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And shame really has kind of two components to it. And the literature I'm quoting here comes from Compassionate Mind Training, or Compassion-Focused Therapy, originated by Paul Gilbert. He's a UK psychologist, magnanimous human being. So shame has two components in that there's external shame, and this comes from a threat-minded mentality. Have you ever walked into a room and started evaluating, like, oh my God, like, what are these people gonna think about me?
all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
That
I stand
is-
on a stage every Sunday, you know. Like,
Of course.
what are these people thinking about me? Yeah.
Of course. So that is a natural human tendency because evolutionarily speaking, human brains, we didn't create them, we didn't design them. They were created for us, not by us. Now that makes a huge difference because when we look at how humans have evolved, we need each other. We need our care, we need our support. And when we don't get that, basically rejection and death are one and the same to a human brain. So we develop all kinds of strategies to help us to cope with external shame. And external shame essentially is where we worry excessively about being negatively evaluated in the mind of another human being. Because again, to be rejected, even if you don't like that person and they reject you, you want their acceptance, right? So the other part of shame here is internal shame. And that's typically where we are evaluating ourselves to be usually not good enough or kicking ourselves in the butt for things that we have done or haven't done. And that's a pretty toxic combination, and that's a lot of times why people come to see me. So you might ask then, well, where the heck does compassion fit in this?
Well, I want to pause there because, you know, in the color code, I'm a yellow.
Hey, great. So you're all about fun and
I'm all about fun, and I think, you know, everybody should get along, and I want people to like me. That's one of the pieces of being a yellow is I want people to like me. So I get what you're talking about. The whole shame cycle is very real to me.
And it's excruciating.
It is.
You know, when we make a mistake or we mess up, usually we make it so hard on ourselves. In fact, my critic inside, my inner critic, I recently discovered has a name. And it's the agonizer, actually.
Agonizer.
Because it doesn't let me let go of anything. And this, basically, it's a safety behavior. That's what the self-critic is trying to do. It's trying to keep you safe, but in a very misguided way. Somehow, by beating the crap out of yourself, telling yourself you're no good, that's going to make you a better human being over time? I think not.
Well, you talk about the development of the brain. Is that something that's more modern in nature? Did it have more of a function evolutionarily that kind of got distorted in the 17th, 18th, 19th century? Recently?
That's a great question. I think to answer that, when we look at how humans have evolved, actually from the Stone Age on up, human beings have always struggled with external evaluations. So this isn't a new thing by any means. But I think given that we have a lot more science and being able to study human relationships and of course inner human relationships, how we intrapersonal with yourself, that we have the ability now to say, hey, we understand how this works, and now we can give labels to these things and explanations.
I'm a big fan of, Brené Brown. She does a lot of research on shame, doesn't she?
Yeah, she does.
Specialties?
Oh, she's fantastic. Her research on vulnerability is just spot on. But I would also say that we need compassion, and actually this is where I'll kind of get into that, if that's quite all right.
Absolutely.
Thank you kindly. So, when, going back a moment, when we feel vulnerable, oftentimes that's a very excruciating feeling. So we need to back it up with a sense of compassion. And so compassion, so defined, at least from the literature, I'm going to take the Dalai Lama's definition. This is a sensitivity to one or another's suffering with a commitment to both alleviate and prevent that suffering. Now, that's a really important distinction.
Can you say that definition one more time?
Yes, of course. It is a sensitivity to your own or someone else's suffering with a commitment to both alleviate and prevent that suffering. And there are kind of two psychologies embedded one on top of the other with this. So you can think about it as, the first psychology is that of being sensitive or engaging with our suffering. Most of the time when we are suffering ourselves, we want to escape from it. I don't know of anybody who wakes up in the morning and says, oh, I've got anxiety. This is a great opportunity to treat myself with compassion. I just don't see that, okay? But what I do see is people, obsessively going on their phones, or why do people use drugs and alcohol? Or why do we have compulsive sex? These are all strategies that we're trying to use to get away from how we feel. So with compassion-focused therapy, with this sensitivity, we want to engage with our suffering, which means having emotional courage.
Oh, rather than avoid.
Right. We want to get into the feels. I'm going to go on a brief tangent, and then I'll come back. I'm notorious for this.
That's all right.
So one of the other treatment modalities I've been learning in the past year is called focusing, more specifically Zen focusing. And I want to make a distinction that human minds, they think, it's what they do. So we can, have you ever heard the phrase, I'm sure you have, I'm stuck in my headspace? Yeah. So that's a normal human thing to do, to be stuck up here. And so it's very easy for us to merge with that material so that we say that I am angry, I am frustrated. Yeah, that person did this, yeah, that person did that. And we get stuck in a story that we tell ourselves. So the idea here with compassion is that we want to step back from that stuff. We want to be with our feelings, we don't want to be our feelings. We want to be with the critic, we don't want to be the critic. And so coming back to our compassion definition, the second strategy, or the second part of this, second psychology, excuse me, is that of, I'm forgetting what it is now.
Well, the Dalai Lama's definition is where you began with that,
Yeah.
sensitivity and...
So it's engagement and then, alleviation. Okay, yeah. So basically, it is alleviation of suffering. That is, what can I do to help myself or another person take care of this problem now and prevent future suffering? So how I teach compassion, mostly we start with education on the brain. How does your brain function, especially when it's under threat? What do you do? How do you defend yourself? Where did that come from? And especially, we explore shame. What is it like when you feel ashamed? When's the first time you can remember having an experience of shame? What did you do with that? How did your caregivers take care of you, right? And so we are shaped by our experiences. So how we approach everything in life is based on a past orientation of how we've been treated.
And everybody's different in
Right.
their shame experience. So
Absolutely.
there's no cookie cutter there.
Absolutely. So in that way, when we can understand how these particular set of experiences shaped you, we can then begin to work with that. So compassion as such, how do we start it? Well, we start by, again, education of the brain and the body, and then we start with mindfulness. And mindfulness is the idea of paying attention right now to this moment without judgment. And that probably sounds impossible.
Internal judgment.
Internal judgment.
Yeah.
Yes. So without labeling, giving a value label as something good, as something bad, I like this, I don't like this. We're just looking at things as they are.
That's harder than it sounds.
Much harder.
Yeah.
And that's why it requires practice, practice, practice. I cannot emphasize that enough. So we start generally cultivating the breath. And if people took nothing else from this conversation, I hope it would be this. That slowing down the breath slows down the body and the mind.
Yeah. Breathing. Yeah, learning to breathe. Well, we're going to come back to that thought here in just a minute. We're going to have a little bit of time for our Mercy Minute, and I'll be right back with Matt Porte, who is a counselor at Renewed Mental Health. So stick around, freshen up your coffee, and we will be right back.
You're watching Faith in Our Hometown on KSN TV, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.
Hey, welcome back. I'm Aaron Brown, and I'm here with Matt Porte from Renewed Mental Health. We're talking about compassion, we're talking about shame, we're talking about the brain, so many cool things. So, Matt, you're just talking about how to practice mindfulness and
Yes.
what that is. So, go back a minute and tell us, what is mindfulness and why is it important, and breathing and those key elements.
Sure. So mindfulness, without mindfulness, we could not get into a compassionate mind state. Now, the title of this talk was essentially, how do we move into a new era, right? Well, that intention starts with the self. So mindfulness is the idea that we can hold in our awareness what's going on without judging, criticizing, evaluating, interpreting, or thinking. We just notice what's present.
Can you give an example of what that might look like
Absolutely.
internally? And,
Absolutely.
and somebody would think about that?
So before we came here to do this, right? I'm sitting out there in the green room or whatever, and this thought comes to my mind. I'm really going to royally screw this up. I'm going to not know what to say.
I was thinking the same thing about me.
Okay, so that means
the two of us.
I'm just going to point out that's actually pretty important, and that speaks to an element of compassion, a different model, mindful compassion, which is common humanity. The idea that you and me, we're not the only one that experiences things. Because in our suffering, which I didn't necessarily define, but in our suffering, we often have this thought, it's just me who feels this way. And that is a horrible place to be. But getting back to what you were saying, so mindfulness is this idea that we can be here in the present moment in our bodies. So a big part of compassion practice is embodiment. And so the compassion itself, ultimately, that's what we're working to cultivate. And we do that through mindfulness first, by just noticing, what are we thinking right now?
And you were doing this in the green room?
Yes. And so I sat there and I evaluated. I was like, wow, I'm evaluating myself. I'm really, thinking like I'm having this awfulizing, catastrophizing moment where I'm thinking I'm just going to screw this all up. So I started my soothing rhythm breathing, which I actually do want to show you in a little bit. And a big part of compassion practice when we stop evaluating is we just notice, oh yeah, my mind is telling me that I'm going to screw up because it's afraid. So something you can say to yourself, to your mind, when it does this is, oh yeah, this is called thanking the mind. Thanks mind for reminding me that you're worried that I'm going to screw this up. I get it, I understand. It's not my fault I feel this way. I'm not choosing to feel this way. This is just a normal reaction that I'm having to a particular topic, e.g. public speaking, and there's a number one fear of that because of external shame. You don't want to look like a fool, right? So I'm
an expert at that, so.
Well, you and me
lean
both.
into it.
So I sat there and I was like, okay, this is completely understandable. And I thanked my brain. I got in an upright, dignified position because again, compassion is about embodiment work. It's being this way, not just thinking this way, being this way. And then I started my soothing rhythm breathing, so slowing down my breath significantly, bringing just a little tiny smile to my face. The smile is crucial, actually, because a fake smile still lights up the parts of the brain that indicate happiness. So we're trying to use everything.
So you embody it, and it makes it happen.
Yes, we're trying to make it happen. We're using everything at the human body's disposal to help us to feel soothed in the moment so we can do our best.
See, I think this is really cool stuff because most of us we do it the opposite way. We don't talk myself into feeling good so that then I can embody it.
Right.
But you're saying just the opposite. Embody it, shoulders back, relaxed position, smile on the face, and you can actually influence your thinking.
Yeah, your total physiology, because a relaxed, calm brain thinks very differently than a threat-focused brain. And again, we don't have time to talk about any of that. Which is unfortunate, but basically, while I was in there, I got in my dignified upright position. I did my soothing rhythm breathing with a little smile, breathing in to the count of 4 or 5 with a gentle pause, and then breathing even slower out on the out breath. And something that actually really helps me too is, again, going back to the adage I used a little bit ago, slowing down the breath slows down the body and the mind. When I breathe in on the in-breath, typically I say in my mind, in a warm tone of voice, it's really crucial, warm tone of voice, body slowing down. And then when I breathe out, I say, mind slowing down. And so from this calm state, this is when we can actually address problems from a wider purview. Threat-based thinking typically has us in tunnel vision. Analyzing, interpreting, evaluating. And we don't see all the possibilities. But a calm brain, a calm body, we can actually then begin to be our best self. And that's what we're really going for. A big part of compassion and compassionate mind training is remembering that we are embodying wisdom. We're embodying courage. We're embodying a motivation to help us when we're suffering. and when others are suffering. And just that intention alone, in my view, going back to kind of, why are we talking about this today? If we have the intention every day when we wake up to be the best version of ourselves that we can, mistakes, flaws, and all, and we go about our day with the intention to notice when we're suffering. And in my view, when a person is in their headspace and they're agonizing about what could happen, they're anxious or they're depressed and they're looking back on their life with regrets, or they're beating the crap out of themselves for all their mistakes and worrying how they're going to be evaluated by other people, mark my words, that is genuine human suffering in action.
Yeah, that's interesting too, because I don't think most people would say that that is genuine human suffering.
They wouldn't. And actually this begets kind of a conversation very briefly on fears, blocks, and resistances. A lot of people are not okay with being compassionate to themselves because there's all kinds of misnomers on what is compassion. Compassion, in most people's eyes that I've talked to in my kind of clinic, until they learn otherwise, they think of it as being airy-fairy, group-huggy, weak. And it is anything but. It is about courage, the courage to dive into your suffering. That is not an easy thing.
No, it's not. And it's not. My faith tradition is, one of the core principles is love your neighbor as you love yourself.
Yes.
And we concentrate on loving your neighbor, which we need to do, but we forget about the second part, which is love yourself.
Yeah, us.
And what I've learned over the years is that I cannot really love my neighbor until I love myself.
It's difficult. And so in that way, this is why I think compassion is the way forward. If we're really going to heal, we need to be able to, inside and out, hold the space for ourselves, give ourselves patience, understanding. Because being human, being quite frank, I'm not going to swear on public TV, but it's really effing difficult. Okay, it is really effing difficult.
Yeah. Well, you talked about, this kind of seems like a cycle, correct me if I'm wrong here, but shame, moving into presence.
Yes, it is a cycle.
Moving into compassion for self, compassion for others. What are some of the biggest sources of shame for people?
So for a lot of people, shame comes from, now if we get into kind of some of the heavy stuff, if you grow up in a household, or if someone grows up in a household where their caregivers aren't responsive to their needs, and in fact tell them, the tough love approach, there may be a time and a place for tough love. At the same time, though, kids need to learn that they're safe and that they can go to their caregivers when they're upset. But when they're shamed for having emotions, when they're shamed for being sensitive, I know I was a sensitive kid in school and I got plenty of that. This is where we begin to learn, where we have shame experiences of, well, there must be something about me that's deeply flawed. There must be something about me that's awful and terrible. But shame experiences can come from anything. Just as I was sitting over there, you had mentioned something in the first segment where it was Ivy was talking about how hot it got on the concrete, and you had mentioned something about marinara, and I laughed out loud, and I was like, oh God, please edit that out. I hope nobody heard that, right? And I could feel this, flush of heat to my face, and that was a shame moment. And what I chose to do was to just observe it. Oh yeah, this is normal, this is understandable. And again, stepping back from it. But shame can come from all types of sources, but typically it comes from how we appear to other people or not getting from other people what we need. I can remember, can I get personal, is that okay?
Well, we've only got a few seconds left, so.
Okay. I'll just say this. I had a relationship in college, it was very bad, and she steamrolled me quite a bit. And because of that experience, I had a lot of anger, which goes along with shame.
Right.
And so whenever we feel not heard, invalidated, those are absolutely shaming experiences.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate really what you're talking about here today in that cycle and knowing and breathing and the physicality of affecting our brains. And so I hope that, I hope people are picking up on this, because I think this can revolutionize a lot of people's lives. And if they need help doing it, that's what you do. You are kind of that Sherpa in order to guide people into a place of health, internal health, physical health, mental health, spiritual health.
Yes.
So they can call Renewed Health and get connected there and
Absolutely.
and find a way. So we don't have to be imprisoned by shame any
No.
longer. We do not have to be imprisoned by anger or hate or any of those other things.
Oh, no, we don't.
I so deeply appreciate what you've been sharing with us today, and this is great stuff. So I encourage folks out there, make the connection. You do not have to make this journey alone, and I'm always telling folks, get a good counselor, and good counselors, I think, give good tools. They load up a person's toolbox with good tools to be healthy in so many ways. So I got to wrap up here with Matt, but I appreciate you so much and so glad that you're on here. We'll be back in just a few seconds after this brief Mercy Minute.
Blessings and greetings of Mercy to you. My name is Anna Nichols. I am a Sister of Mercy and currently the leader of Heritage and Spirituality at Mercy International Association. I love the fact that sisters throughout time have gone where they have been called to go, and they have often picked up ministries that they never intended to pick up. 25 years ago, there were 22,000 Sisters of Mercy globally. Today we're down to about 6,200 with Sister Rock and some of the others. But despite the fact there are 6,500 or 6,200 sisters left, there is an amazing number of women and men of Mercy who are working alongside us, and that continues to expand, and for me that is incredibly exciting. So as far as National Catholic Sisters Week, I really look at the legacy that they have passed on and the fact that so many women, men, young people are living Mercy today. That really is for me what's significant.
It has been great spending a little bit of the Sunday morning with you, and I hope that some of what you've heard today maybe actually changes you a little bit in learning to know and identify what shame is, and learning to kind of break the shame cycle by stepping back and evaluating why you do that, and knowing a little bit about your own brain. Just love learning those sorts of things. And then entering a different cycle, a cycle of compassion for yourself, along with having compassion for others. So just know that faith takes so many different forms in our spiritual life, our mental life, and our physical life. So I hope that you're continuing to work on that. This has been Faith in Our Hometown, a great Sunday here in February. So please continue to take care of yourselves, take care of one another, and continue to build your faith here in our hometown. We'll see you next Sunday. Make time to be here. Take care and God bless.
Thanks for watching. Faith in Our Hometown can be seen Sunday mornings at 6:30 and 9 a.m. on KSN. Brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.